Fernandez, welcome. And just for the record, the chairman's observation that your answers tend to be shorter than those of most witnesses is a very high compliment here in the Senate. In your written testimony, you highlight that Secretary Buttigieg has said that safety is DOT's North Star. But despite having far fewer riders, New York, LA, Chicago, and Philadelphia, among others, are all seeing spikes in transit crime. Even New York City's mayor, a former cop, said he doesn't feel safe on the subway. Now, you mentioned that every transit rider deserves a safe, secure, and reliable trip. Transit agencies have, as I mentioned during my opening comments, received staggering, extraordinary amounts of federal taxpayer funding recently, including funding that can be used for security and to combat crime. So my question is, so how much of all of this money that we have recently delivered to transit agencies is actually being used to reduce the spike in crime that's occurring on our transit systems?
Senator Toomey, every transit agency is committed to safety, as is the U.S. Department of Transportation. And what we're experiencing, what transit agencies are experiencing in this time, is a result of many factors. Given the pandemic, the effect that has had on on loss of life and livelihood, we've received an increase.
I understand. I've got limited time. I understand there are many factors contributing, but my question is, how much of the resources, the huge amount of new resources we've provided, is being used to address this spike in crime?
The transit agencies have access to their formula dollars, and those dollars increased by 30%, and they are applying those dollars towards all of their programs, including safety. They're required. If you're looking for a specific, I'd be happy to provide you with a specific number. I don't have a number in front of me.
I would appreciate it if you would. I'd like to know, first of all, that the FTA is in fact tracking the amount of money that's being spent to make our dangerous subway systems less dangerous, and how much that is. But it's also my understanding that in most cities, fare evasion is a crime. And experience has shown that cracking down on fare evasion reduces the incidence of criminal activity in the subway systems. Does FTA collect data on fare evasion?
The National Transit Database does not collect information on fare evasion. It does collect the information on how much of the fare ratio of the collection of fares. I'm sorry, not the collection of fares, but what the operating budget for each of the agencies, what it constitutes, how much is generated by fares and how much is generated by other countries.
But you acknowledge that there is a high correlation between fare evasion and criminal activity on subway systems.
There is a correlation between many factors that affect
yeah, but this is an obvious one. People are choosing not to pay their fare. They are breaking the law. And then, not shockingly, some of them go on to break other laws because they are, after all, lawbreakers. I just think that fare evasion is an important violation of the law that the FTA should be tracking. But you don't track it.
Senator Toomey, we do not track fare evasion. Transit agencies, as you may know, some of them have open fare, others have fare gates. So they all collect their fares in a very different manner. And the information that is provided to us really has to do with the resources, the sources of funds that build their budgets.
Okay. Let's go on to the topic of the capital investment grants. Last year's infrastructure law requires that transit agencies make progress on their deferred maintenance of their transit systems in order to be eligible to receive a CIG grant. And the idea, obviously, is help protect federal taxpayers and ensure that CIG funds are not being spent on large capital projects for transit agencies who aren't even properly maintaining their existing systems. My concern is that the new interim guidance that the FTA has put out really makes a mockery of this requirement from the statute. As you know, there are 4 categories of assets on which there are deferred maintenance backlogs: rolling stock, equipment, facilities, and infrastructure. Your interim guidance allows a transit agency to make no progress whatsoever. In fact, could go backwards on 3 out of the 4. And then on the 4th, which is rolling stock, There are 26 different types of rolling stock assets, and under your interim guidance, an agency can be losing ground on deferred maintenance on 25 of the 26 if they had that many. As long as they're making some progress on one of them, then that's deemed to qualify them for this progress requirement. This does not seem like a faithful implementation of the law. So could you explain what is the justification for ignoring 75% of the categories of assets when they actually account for a very large portion of deferred maintenance?
Senator Toomey, first of all, thank you for, and this committee and the Congress for including that requirement in the bipartisan infrastructure law. I think it's very important. All transit agencies have, in fact, a process for identifying the state of their the state of their assets, the life cycle of those assets, and when they need to be replaced. The additional requirement of a transit asset management and tying that requirement to the capital investment grant approvals is we put out guidance for that early this spring and received public comments. We've taken those comments, and in particularly the ones regarding the targets and how to, we'll be publishing a final implementation in the very near future that's more specific. Right now, we continue to evaluate the various categories of the assets and how they are being monitored or they are being rated through their condition. And one of the things that we do know is that transit agencies, when they are applying for a capital investment grant program, we do a thorough review of their budgets, we do a thorough review of their capital programs, we do a thorough review of their ability to continue operating the systems that they have.
Well, I'm out of time, but I just want to point out that it's impossible for me to understand how it is a faithful implementation of the law to systematically exclude the vast majority of deferred maintenance categories. And I know that it is an interim guidance. I'm certainly hoping that the final guidance will address a much more comprehensive category of deferred maintenance as is intended by the statute. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Toomey. Senator Menendez.